welcome back to Way of the Wrench, and on today's very special episode, we are going to be turning this normal, boring lockdown bar into one that has a fire button, and I know you guys have been waiting for this for a long time, so stick around, you're not going to want to miss it. Now, as with building anything for your virtual pinball cabinets, there are many ways to get a fire button done on your cabinet. One of the easiest, however, most expensive ways is literally just to buy the components. So if you get a lockdown bar with a fire button already in there and the RGB controls for the lights, and you get yourself a notched out version of a lockdown bar receiver, then essentially you're just installing all that stuff, and then you continue on with the rest of the video here to show you how to get it going. Like I said, most expensive, but probably the easiest. Where can you get that stuff? I believe Virtual Pin has a complete kit where you get the lockdown bar that has a fire button and all the light controls, and one of these notched out lockdown bar receivers. So you can go get that from Virtual Pin. The other way is just go directly to Jersey Jack Pinball and you can buy a notched out receiver and a lockdown bar. From my research though, the only downside with that is any lockdown bar that has the fire button from Jersey Jack also comes only in a black or a gold finish because it's basically replacement parts for some of their games like The Hobbit. And another way would be to completely design your V-Pin from scratch at the beginning using Stern pinball parts. They have plenty of lockdown bar receivers that have fire buttons in them, but you would be getting a different lockdown bar receiver to use Stern, which is those toggle style clamps. So there is another way. Now, for the rest of you guys, let's figure out how we can do this a little bit more DIY and make it a little cheaper. Okay, step one, we got to take this lockdown bar receiver off. All right, so first question up is where are we putting this fire button hole? Well, we want this hole right to be exactly in the middle of the length of the lockdown bar and not quite in the middle here. So it's kind of tricky, right? Well, if we flip it over, there's actually 3 of these holes and an additional piece for the lockdown bar mechanism. This center hole is exactly where you need to put it. So it's right in the center this way, and it's a bit higher to the front edge of the lockdown bar. So if you center punch with a hammer and a center punch, nice and centered in there, make it nice and deep so that the drill doesn't wander, that's where you want it to be. Okay, don't forget to use your safety glasses. Grab yourself a hammer and a center punch and get this right bang in the center and give it a nice good hit. Okay, second question is what size do we have to drill for our fire button to go in? Well, you need a 1 1/8 inch hole for that fire button to go down flush with the lockdown bar receiver or to sit inside of a receiver, which I'll show you in a bit. So once again, we got a whole bunch of options on how to drill this hole. Here is number 1. This is a 1 1/8 inch drill bit, but it is massive. You're going to need a drill press because anything this big is going to have a tang on it. Not a really great way of doing it. So, very next thing is we've got these little step drills. You just have to make sure that the last size on here can do a 1 1/8 inch hole, and you can basically just slowly start drilling the hole bigger and bigger. You can use this, go really nice and slow, make sure you use coolant or cutting oil. Another option is your good old-fashioned hole saw. Now, if you're going to try this method with a hole saw, really make sure that they are bi-metal hole saws that can hold up to drilling metal. And once again, go slow, use some cutting oil. Now, these may not be able to cut the stainless steel that's your lockdown bar is made out of. So rather than kind of trying this and having it not work right for me, I have gone ahead and bought a 1 inch and 1/8 inch diameter carbide teethed hole saw. And so this guaranteed will work, and I will put the link to this down below so that you can order it yourself. All right, now let's start drilling the hole. Now, probably the best way to drill this is to be using actual drill press. However, not a lot of you guys have drill presses, so we're gonna be just using a regular hand drill here. However, the setup is pretty important here. So I've got a piece of wood underneath so that I can drill into it and not damage my table. I've got some pieces of cloth underneath just to not scratch up the top of the lockdown bar. I don't have any cloth underneath where we're going to be drilling so it doesn't get caught. And then to make sure this doesn't move on me, I've got 2 blocks of wood and 2 C-clamps that I've clamped it to the table so that it's not going to move when I start drilling. All right, here we go. Okay, use a little bit of cutting oil just to make the process a little bit easier on the tool. And don't go crazy fast. Don't go full on the trigger. Kind of scale back a bit. But it is carbide, so we can go a little faster, but go slow. Make sure it's nice and straight as well. And it's wanting to start drilling in the right spot. And then go for it. Okay, and when it goes a lot quieter and you see sawdust, you are through. All right, we got a hole in there. Perfect. One thing I didn't think of, the hot chips coming off, you got that beer foam installed on here already. It kind of melted a couple chips into the foam. Not a big deal, but if you don't want any damage there, put a piece of masking tape there, and then when you're done, you can just peel it off. Now, this hole is very, very crazy sharp, so rather than cut ourselves and bleed all over our V-pin, we need to clean that up. So you can use a Dremel tool or a deburring tool or a little cheap set of needle files. Go ahead and deburr that. Just watch that you don't scratch the surrounding area on the top of the lockdown bar when you do it. Now with the lockdown bar back on and clamped down, I've got one of my short Marco Specialties stern replacement pinball buttons that are clear. If I put that in there, it actually doesn't even sit all the way in before it hits. It's about 1 millimeter shy. So there's not a lot of room in here with the stock lockdown bar receiver. And if I was to measure from the center where that button tip would be, I'm getting 27 or 28 millimeters. So with the standard lockdown bar, you're going to have some kind of spacer to be able to do anything in there, which is the next topic that we need to talk about. Or if you've got a lockdown bar receiver with a cutout and a notch, then that may not actually be an issue for you. And if you are going that route, they do sell a longer version. I believe it's 1 inch and 3/8 long, same clear button, so that if you need a little bit extra reach to get down to your switches and stuff like that with the cutout lockdown bar receiver, then that'll work for you. Okay, let's talk about the adapter that we need. All right, so this is the stern style fire button spacer that you can buy from Marco Specialties, or I actually have the STL for this file, so I will put this down in the video description below so that you can 3D print it if you'd like to. Now, this spacer has 2 little notches in here that coordinate with 2 little bumps in the fire button here, so that when you turn it, it locks in and prevents that from moving. And on the other side, there's actually a big tab of plastic where if you have a little groove cut or ground into here, it will prevent this spacer from turning. And I believe that's so that when you're pounding on your fire button in games over the next couple months or years, that this thing does not slowly start to undo and come loose on you. So you might not want to have to grind in here. If that's the case, you're gonna have to take a little razor blade and kind of cut away this lump or modify the STL file so it doesn't have that. But I kind of like the idea of having this not slowly come undone when I'm using this fire button. So just be very cognizant of where that notch has to be. So the notch is on the other side of where this spacer has a little bit of a taper where it kind of comes down. And that's supposed to go down and fill in the little spot here where the metal goes down and away from the fire button. So we have to put a little grind here. Like I said, you can use a file. I think I'm going to use a Dremel tool and get this done nice and quick and just deburr it when we're done. Okay, there we go. That didn't take too long, but don't rush it. Make sure you don't grind that groove out further than the extent of the button or you're gonna see a hole in your lockdown bar. So at this point we can start assembling this. It goes in like that. Short flipper button, turn it till it locks. You're going to need a washer on the back because the PAL nut is smaller than the hole that you just drilled. So a simple stainless steel 5/8 washer. Put that over top and kind of squeeze it underneath the foam seal there. And then go ahead and tighten up your PAL nut. There we go. Perfect. Punch it. Okay, now that we've got this flipper button installed, we can now take a measurement to find out how much space we have between the tip of the fire button and the top of the lockdown bar receiver. So we have about 27 from the top, so let's make it 26 from the bottom of movement up until the top of the lockdown bar. And so that is about 12 or 13 millimeters of clearance. And then this changes or lowers by 5 when you press it all the way in. So we have to have our switch, our contacts, and our LED lights assembly less than 13 millimeters and unpressed, and then that'll give us 5 millimeters to press and make the contact. So let's see what that's going to look like. Now for our fire button switch, I'm going to be using a real flipper button pinball leaf switch. It's got a pretty low profile, and that'll work for us. If you needed it to be even tighter, you could use something called a membrane switch. That would work okay too. So we're going to use that, and then just to continue on using our awesome L'Atelier d'Arnoz products, I have an extra one of these MX buttons so that we can use these 4 LEDs to get our fire button lit up to whatever color is supposed to be for that machine, and when the fire button is supposed to be pressed, it should be flashing away. So we got this, and this is for the quick connect. This could be desoldered and made skinnier if we need to, because it is really quite thin. It's only about 2 millimeters besides this big green connection here. So we can take that off. So now I just got to figure out how to make this work. Now I stumbled across a STL file for a different way of doing this, where you could mount all of this in here. So this would get bolted or screwed into the front panel underneath the lockdown bar. This would go up like this, and there's a little bracket that you can print off at the same time, and that would get attached there, and that would hold the LEDs. And then there's 2 spots here for some screws so that you can put your leaf switches underneath. And then that's right where your fire button would press. And then all you got to do is mount this in such a way that it is in the right spot so the flipper buttons will press. Very slick setup. However, this requires a cutaway lockdown bar. So I'm going to try to get this to work for you guys so you don't have to buy one of those cutaway lockdown bars. So I'm thinking I could use this STL file. I just don't need the bracket part. So I guess I could just take a Dremel tool and cut this part off and have all that mounted in there. But I think what I'll do for you guys is I'll take a look at this STL file and see if I can cut this bracket part off and then print it out just for that. And then we'll put this all together. So see you in a couple of seconds. Okay, with the fire button removed and this lockdown in place, you can take a pencil and just mark the center location of this fire button so we know where we have to place that 3D printed part we just made. Okay, and there's the hole that we just have to center that part off for our fire button to hit it properly. Okay, so that is where the switch and the lights have to go, through the hole in the lockdown bar. So I tried off camera to figure out a way to get a little 3D printed holder thing here for a switch stack and to hold our little MX button board from L'Atelier Arnoz. And I just about had it all the way done, and then I realized that the glass comes down, and whatever space I thought I had, I don't have enough. And without modifying and grinding into the lockdown bar receiver and into the cabinet a bit, I had to start for a plan B. So here is my plan B. So instead of using the MX board, we're just needing some LEDs. So let's add some LEDs, and I thought, you know, if 4 is good, let's make 6. On either side, so for a total of 12, like that. Okay, we'll just have to run the power and data and ground and have it loop back, and then we'll just call the fire button 12 LEDs. And then the switch stack itself could get mounted right to the lockdown bar like that. And the best part of all this is the glass will clear all of that so we won't have any issues. So problem solved. So first thing up, in case this lockdown bar receiver ever has to get removed, I'm going to put some male and female JST connections on that. So I've got to solder the power ground and signal to one end, the data in part of this LED strip, and then just loop it back to the other strip. And then we are either going to hot glue gun this down, or I might actually drill and tap for some machine screws to put this down in there. And about the only other thing I can think of is we may have to put a little bit of hot glue gun to cover up contacts here so there's no accidental touching of the electrical contacts between this switch and the LEDs themselves. So let's solder this up. All right, that looks like it'll work nice. There are some bare electrical contacts here, so before we stick this down, I am going to peel the adhesive back, and I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue gun on the back side and kind of encase those. Clean that really well with some isopropyl alcohol. Okay, and position those around, centered around where that's going to be, where the button is. And then I'm going to cover up the top of those contacts just to really make sure that we're not going to have any accidental shorts happening. Okay, and I'm not going to rely on just that tape to stick these down. I'm going to put some hot glue gun along the edge here and on this edge. And the switch is going to go over top of this and it's going to get pressed down. I don't want any of these contacts to have any issues, so I'm going to put a thin film of this as well over the contacts. And so we don't have this wire getting in the way, I'm also going to glue this into the corner. Okay, now time for the switch. Now position it so that it's going to hit somewhere about here, so there's a little bit of overlap, right where you need it to be. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer where these holes are, drill them and tap them for two number 6 by 32 machine screws, 1/2 inch long, and they can go in there. And if you don't want to do that, you probably could totally get away with just hot glue gunning it in as well. I just want to make sure that this is going to be coming loose with constant tapping. Okay, and then the drill bit I'm using for the number 6 by 32 screws is a 7/64 drill bit. There isn't really much underneath except a spring, so just watch you don't go too fast and go through and into something, but it's not a lot of drilling to be had here. Okay, and make sure you vacuum or blow out all of those little metal pieces. You don't want any of that ending up in your computer or any of your electronic stuff. And then with the long side facing to the top, go ahead and screw in your switch stack. Nice. All right, and there's a shot with the lock bar on through the hole where the fire button's gonna go. One thing I might change is actually print the spacer for the fire button out of a transparent, because then I can make lots of use of all of these LEDs in there. Okay, and with the cabinet all open, remember that earlier we had these wires all ready to go for the fire button, so we just have to hook them up. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I will put a link to the video above where I did this. I believe it's in the one where I did the dude's cab and the button boards. So these are all set up for the fire button. And it doesn't matter which one you connect, because it's just literally whether it connects or not when you hit the fire button. Not a bad idea to put some shrink wrap on ahead of time. Okay, and then make sure you glue gun this stuff out of the way so that it doesn't interfere with anything for the lockdown bar. You don't want to be pinching wires by putting your lockdown bar down. All that's left to do is get the female JST connector and extend the wires a little bit so that we can tap into the very last line of LEDs that we used here. So I've got to add a data out to come up to the strip, to the green wire, and then I've got to extend, or basically do a daisy chain from the ground to the ground and the power to the power. So let's go ahead and do that, and then this is all installed. all the wiring's done, so now it's time to close it up and turn the computer on, and we got a whole bunch of stuff on the digital side to get this up and running. All right, when we turn this on, it's gonna be interesting to see if this is all hooked up. It should probably flash the red, green, and blue from the Wemos at the initial startup. Awesome. You got to celebrate the little wins, because God knows there's a lot of crazy bad stuff that can happen when you're doing VPin stuff too. All right, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over to the Dude's Cab configurator. What's up, dude? And there's a new version. I'm going to just say no to this now just because I have a feeling this is for the new MX Donnie stuff, but I can come back and do this at any other time. Click no. Ooh, got it. All right, we're going to connect. And we have to see what our inputs are for this. So we just got to scroll down till we see fire button. There it is right there. So if I press this fire button, we should be getting fire button flashing or button 13 where it says active inputs. Awesome. That button's working great. Perfect. Okay, well, we don't even have to change anything. That's done, and it's already set to very low latency. Awesome. So we can kick out of this. We don't have to save it because we didn't change it. If you had to change yours, then go ahead and save it by saying send config and save to memory. Okay, kick that out. Next thing we should do is check if our fire button is set up properly in VPX. So we're going to open up Explorer, go to C drive, vPinball, Visual Pinball, and we're going to go find our default vPinball X. Now we're going to go up to Preferences, Configure Keys, and we're going to find Fire button in here. Here it is here, Lock Bar Fire, and it is button 13, so that's automatically saved for us too. Perfect. If it's not, use the pull down and select the right button that you have set up on your Dude's Cab or whatever device you're using. Okay, perfect. Press OK. All right, now, realistically, the fire button should be working in games already, but we now need to get the lights going. So we're going to go to C drive, direct output, and in our config folder, we have our cabinet file. So we either have to make a new cabinet and add the fire button details and redo it that way, or if after a while, you kind of can get what you have to do here. So very first thing, we're going to start right at the very top. And we are just going to add those 12 LEDs for the fire button to this last 10th data channel on the Wemos. And so this strip here is asking what is the total number of LEDs on that strip. So we need to add 12 to this, which is going to be 374. So go ahead and change that. Okay, now it knows how many LEDs are on there. We've added 12, and now we're going to go all the way to the bottom right here before we start getting into the DOF output numbers. So the very last thing that we just tied into is our left MagnaSave. So it's this one right here. So rather than trying to like type all of this out, it's a lot the same. We just have to make a couple changes. So what we're going to do is figure out where we can safely copy and paste. So if you look at the beginning here, there's an LED strip. And at the very end of the last one, there's also a different kind of LED strip text string there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from here all the way to the end. Try not to get any extra spaces or anything. And we're going to right click, copy this, and we have to put it right here. So we're going to put a couple spaces in here. Okay, and if I cursor over here, I can count 1, 2, 3, 4 is where it needs to start. So we're going to go to the bottom, to the bottom and count out 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces. Sometimes this stuff really does matter. And then we're going to right click and paste. So you can see we've got the exact left MagnaSave right after each other. Just take a quick look, make sure you haven't missed up and added spaces or anything like that. Okay, we can get rid of this space. Like that. Now, starting at the duplicated last thing here, that left MagnaSave, we are going to change the name of this. And we can name it whatever we want. So we're going to call this Fire Button. And it is a width of 1 for that LED strip, and it is 12 LEDs long. So make that 12. Does not matter about the arrangement. As far as I know, it's just going to flash all at once. It's close enough that it won't really matter. Okay, RGB stays the same. And now this one here, we have to tell it which LED in the whole long string of LEDs is the start for this fire button. So if we go back and look at what the last one was, which is the same as here, that is the first one for those. Okay, so if we go back here, the first number of LEDs is starting on 2723, and it is only 4 LEDs long. So that means it is going to be using LEDs 2723, 2724, 2725, and 2726, and then it's done. So the very next one that we want is going to be 2727. So we go down here, change that to a 7. And then this stays the same. Brightness, we're going to leave it 100%, but if it's too bright, which would be awesome, well, we can come back and change this later. All right, and the last thing we have to do is actually give it a DOF output number. So we're going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And the very last one is the left MagnaSave. So once again, look at what you need to copy and paste for this to work. So there's like an intro line here for LED Wiz and an outro line. So we're going to start here, no extra spaces, and go all the way to the end there. And we are going to right click, copy, go right to the end there, put a couple spaces in, and we need to see how far this way. It is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like it's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So if we go there and go 1, 2, 3, whoop, put in 8 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we can right click right there and put paste. So there is our duplicated output. So now this one here, we have to change the name and we have to call it exactly what we had before. So fire button, otherwise it won't link the two together. And then these DOF numbers go up in values of 3. So you can see it went 37, 40, 43. So then this one is going to be 46. Perfect, okay, and then we can get rid of this extra space and that extra space, and that should be good. Yep, that's all we need. Okay, so when you're done, we are going to go File, Save, and something I could have done ahead of time. Before you make any changes, you could always just make a backup of this cabinet file, put it somewhere else for safekeeping. That way you know you have a good cabinet file to go back if something went wrong. All right, so go ahead and save this and close this out. Okay, and then the next thing we got to do is we need to go to the VP Universe config tool. This is it right here. Click on anything to prompt the password to pop up. Okay, once you've logged in, make sure you're on the right cabinet. So I'm using the big budget VPN for this. And we're going to go to the cabinet. And then we're going to go down to port assignments. Click on here for the pull down and make sure that we are on the WS2811. That's for our LEDs. And this is what we all had already. And if you remember the number that we just used, we put in for 46. And it's going to take 46, 47, 48 for our fire button. So all we got to do is go over here, pull down here, and we are looking for fire button. Now, when you're looking for your fire button, there are a couple options. So we've got fire button regular, we've got an RGB fire button, and we've also, if you go down here in the list, you're going to see Fire MX. Now, we were wanting MX, so we're going to give this a try. However, there has been some recent changes for fire buttons and specifically, so we're going to try fire button MX and see what happens here. Okay, and there you go, it fills it up. Okay, now to give this a try, we have to update it, and we're going to generate our config. Okay, once that's done, go to your save file. You can open this up here, left click and drag all of this stuff, right click copy, and then we got to put this in C drive, direct output, config file, and then if you right click in here and paste it, and it will ask, do you want to overwrite? You say yes. Woohoo, okay, we are all done. Let's open up a table to be able to see if this works. Now, one thing while we got our VP Universe config up here, what we can do is we can figure out what tables actually use the fire button so that we can test it on a table that works. Okay, so you can come up here to Stats, and then Toy, and you can literally go down and find what you're using, so Fire Button MX. And these are all the toys that they have configured inside of here. So any of these tables will work. So I'll pick something like AC/DC, or I'm just trying to see if we have anything in here already. Oh, and we've got Walking Dead as well. Yeah, that's right, you get to shoot the crossbow. Okay, time to start this up and give it a try. Now I'm gonna shut music off here so that I don't have any copyright issues with YouTube. But let's open up a table here. Well, there we go. It launched the ball with the fire button, so that's cool. The other thing I wouldn't mind seeing is when the gun is operated, or the crossbow. So if I remember correctly, the crossbow is the ramp on the right there. Which I'm going to take forever to hit, probably. Oh, there we go. Okay, loaded the crossbow, it's lit up, and I can shoot it. Awesome. Perfect. And it lit up to tell me that it's time to start shooting that. Awesome.
Dead features are lit. Don't want to be you right now.
Okay, Terminator 2, Judgment Day is another one that uses the fire button. This one will launch the ball as well. And it also has a gun feature. Let's see how long it takes me to get there. Oh, here we go, we can shoot it. It's lit up. Gun's moving and you can shoot it at the target. Hey, nailed it. Started a multi-ball. Sweet. All right, that's a wrap on another video from Way of the Wrench, this time on how to get a wicked awesome pinball fire button attached to your lockdown bar. And man, I'm pretty happy how that turned out, considering that we can literally just take the lockdown bar off and there's no wires to disconnect or anything. Very clean install and with minimal stuff. So pretty awesome. What's next? I think we need to start messing around with some HD matrix GIFs. See if we can get some cool stuff going for the next video for that. If you haven't already, why don't you join us on Instagram so you can check out the shop in between the videos. Till next time, take it easy.